Hi, everyone. This is Jeremy Pritchard with TrinDocs. I'm joined by Mike Christian today, one of our repeat clients. And Mike, thank you again so much for taking time to talk with us. I know that you previously worked with Great Plains, Microsoft GP, and now your organization uses Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. Thank you for taking time to talk with us. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience with TrinDocs all in all? And specifically, I'm interested in learning why at your previous company you used TrinDocs. Why did you carry TrinDocs over to your new company into your new role? That's kind of putting your neck on the line a little bit. Why did you do that?
If we were going to start with why I chose TrinDocs originally, or why we chose TrinDocs originally, it was because we were looking for something that can integrate with Great Plains, but also integrate with all of the other systems that we were using. And at my previous company, I think we had 7 in total. So TrinDocs integrates well with Great Plains, but it also can be customized to match your other workflows and your other processes, especially if there's SQL tables. So we used TrinDocs to customize our AP process and our receiving process and our purchasing process, which were in different systems.
I didn't realize we had 7 different systems we were pulling together for you. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think you were probably pulling together 4 of them.
Okay.
Yeah, so we had like a system for the store. We had a system for our internet orders. We had a system for our catalog orders, and you were pulling data from multiple systems.
Right. That's good. Well, obviously, being a Dynamics-focused institution, we work beyond Microsoft Dynamics, but GP and Business Central, those are our sweet spots. So can you talk about both your experience as a GP user and what TrinDocs helped you do there? And then after you do that, we'll talk about TrinDocs and Business Central and kind of the user experience there.
For both, the experience has been similar. It takes the data entry part out of the user interface. So when you're in GP, each invoice, each credit memo has to go in and you have to set it up on a kind of one-by-one transactional basis. With TrinDocs, it kind of automates that process where there's a flow that happens in TrinDocs and then it pushes it to GP once it's ready to be completed and posted. So the interface, it's not so transactional the way it is currently set up in GP, like originally. Whereas you take each invoice and then entering that invoice and then going to the next invoice and entering that invoice. It's kind of more of a organic workflow with TrinDocs.
I see. So it sounds like TrinDocs should save you a lot of time and also increase visibility into your cash flow. Is that your experience?
That is my experience. It allows you to customize the process outside of like the normal BC processes.
Okay.
Or GP processes in this instance, right? Sometimes invoices are held. Sometimes invoices are, you have a question on a PO to see why it doesn't match and you don't want to post the invoice yet, but you still want to capture it in a workflow.
So it boosts visibility to you. What about visibility to the greater organization? Has TrinDocs helped in any ways there?
Absolutely. All of the workflows are going to be visible and it's customizable to roles. So your purchasing staff can see the PO roles. They can see certain invoices, like whatever you decide or however you want it. Your receiving staff can see, the POs that the receiving is attached to and the invoice that it's attached to. It'll eliminate a lot of the one-off questions that you get in accounting for the status of an invoice, because users can go in and see where an invoice is if you would like that. They have read-only access for certain things like that, so they can see where these things are, so you have less.
Okay, so hearing that puts a couple of thoughts in my mind. The read-only access makes me think of audits. Has TrinDocs helped your audit process in any way?
Yes. At my last company, everything was paper-based. So we complete a packet, which was a three-way matching packet. You staple the check to it, you file it away. And then for the audit, they pull, certain checks, and you'd be in your team would basically be pulling files for 2 or 3 days. You had the invoices, the POs, and the receiving. So in TrinDocs, you could go in and type in a check number and download your whole packet. So it saved us a lot of time during the audit.
That's great. So you had all the documentation. Anytime you searched for one thing, you found all of the things you needed, it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's very good. Well, I know our tagline at TrinDocs is automation as unique as you. And part of what that means is that there are no two TrinDocs solutions exactly alike. So I'm curious to see the differences from your prior organization and using TrinDocs at GP to your new organization and now using TrinDocs with Business Central. What are some of the things that you've seen that were kind of best practices or really your favorite benefits on each of those different ERP systems?
Great Plains made a little bit more sense to me, if I'm being honest, than VC. VC has a different interface. They're both Microsoft products, so it's been similar. I still haven't gotten to the place where we were at my last organization, where like it was really down, like perfect.
Well, GP's been around a little while, folks have had a
Yeah,
chance to iron things out.
yeah. So I was also there a long time working with GP and the other software solutions. Whereas in my new company at Impreg, I've been kind of learning how BC works and learning how to implement TrinDocs with what we currently have in BC. But TrinDocs has helped out a lot with that as far as like the visibility. Visibility was one big issue that I had with the new company at Impreg.
Okay, so TrinDocs is helping you with visibility. Can you tell me a little bit about the integration? And obviously, there are lots of different people that do AP automation, and most of them say, yep, we can work with Business Central. What's your thoughts on that and specifically the TrinDocs integration? How would you describe that for Business Central and for Great Plains?
And I think your benefit, your biggest like strong point is the customization and how your team, the TrinDocs teams, works with you to make your workflow fit BC, or really not even BC. It customizes your workflow so you have more flexibility than the native system has.
Tell me specific examples about that.
Yeah, so every business is different, but when you open BC or you open GP and the standard workflow, you're going to have a PO, you're going to have receiving. However, each business is different, and you may have different steps that happen prior to POs being completed or receiving being done. You might have different variance analysis that you need done. You might have thresholds you need done. You might have other information that you need to capture that is not in the native system, right? The fields are limited in BC and GP.
And TrinDocs allows you to capture that information?
TrinDocs allows you to capture any information that you want. In order to post an invoice, you still need the standard stuff. You need the invoice date, you need like the vendor number, you need the amounts, you need the standard stuff. But at Impreg, at my current company, we are a big ESG company, right? So we want to capture ESG information for certain vendors. You want to know your wattage of your electricity bill. You want to know how far your materials traveled for your freight to see your carbon footprint, right? So there's nowhere in BC to put that information. But in TrinDocs, I can capture that information as we're processing invoices. I can capture it through templates, and I can even route it to a different workflow after or prior to posting to BC. So that's the biggest benefit.
I see that. That's helpful. Mike, you know this too from our years of working together, but you are a TrinDocs super fan and a TrinDocs super user. What are your top 2 or 3 favorite features that TrinDocs has to offer you?
One, I like the customizable fields. I like the workflow aspect of it because it's beyond, BC has workflows in it, but they're kind of heavy or static. That's probably a better word, right? They're hard to manipulate. There may be some coding necessary. It's just not as flexible, right? TrinDocs will allow you to relate different workflows, which is helpful. I've been able to use it for our new company in the production aspect of it, where we have production fields where we're typing things in. It gives you a lot of flexibility. That's the biggest thing that I like. You sign up for TrinDocs, you sign up for the AP, but you're not necessarily limited to that aspect of it. You have a form or system. Sometimes when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, but it's a tool that you can use for whatever else that may come up. Part of it was checks. I used checks at my last company, and we wanted to tie the actual payment, the digital check image, to the payments. So I added that in.
So you could see the check itself along with the invoice.
You could see the check itself, and you could actually get a whole packet, like a whole vendor packet or a payment packet, out and downloaded together. Because really the check is the key thing that ties multiple invoices together for when you want to download it all and give it to your auditors. So we were able to add credit cards, like we were able to add things as new problems occurred. And to me, that was the biggest selling point. Man, I started in last January. I think I started asking for TrinDocs in March. So 2 months in, because I needed a flexible tool that I could use for a variety of problems. Not every problem, but a lot of problems.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. You obviously, at a prior company, used TrinDocs very successfully with Great Plains. Now you're into a new company, and 2 months in, you're really putting your reputation on the line by requesting to use TrinDocs.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through the thought process and how you came to the realization that, yes, this is what I need to do, and how did you kind of sell that upchain in your organization?
I started right in January, and I quickly saw that they have data integrity. At my last company, we had an IT department. We had all of these things set up. We had like a lot of internal technical resources that we could use to solve problems. At my new company, we didn't have some of that infrastructure available. So a lot of people were cleaning spreadsheets constantly. The same type of spreadsheet was being cleaned constantly. We had forms that people were filling out manually, passing to other people, and then them entering it into an Excel workbook. And it was leading to so many, like, one, it was slow. Two, we had way more errors. Three, we weren't able to quickly analyze data to find problems. It was really, really making us slow and heavy, particularly for me at month end, trying to compile all of my reports. TrinDocs is able to handle a lot of these aspects. And another benefit that you have besides the flexibility and the customization is the data is then put into a SQL table. And actually, TrinDocs showed me this in 2019, I think. You guys did a Power BI webinar where you reached into the SQL tables and you created a lot of like reports that I was already creating in Excel. That made me want to go learn Power BI and create my reports, which I did for the next few years after that. So now I'm pretty good at, like, once I saw that you could put it into a SQL table and you clean up the data, that gets rid of everyone's like extra work of having to go in every month or every week or day and clean up data. It's a very manual process. So it allows you to create a workflow for the data, and then allows me to capture the data at any point in time from the SQL tables.
So it sounds like TrinDocs has helped you eliminate a lot of manual entry, a lot of manual reporting processes.
Yes, and a lot of redundant processes. So person A doesn't have to enter the information and pass it to person B, so he can enter the information just in a slightly different way.
That's helpful. One of the questions I get from people that are doing that type of work, they say, well, if TrinDocs is going to do all this work that I'm doing now, then what am I going to do? So what have you and your team done with the extra time that you've gained?
There's so much other work to do. What I found is that the people that were doing the work aren't the people that wanted to be doing that work. Like, for instance, we had people that were in Excel that didn't want to be in Excel. They didn't have the desire, the skills to be in Excel, and they were entering the data. And then they would pass that data on to someone else, and it becomes like the telephone game where every time that you move it, it changed.
Right.
We lost the visibility of why it was changing at each step. So to me, it's been a big benefit, right? We don't have a large staff. So being able to change that manual process has been able to, one, allow us to source and improve our errors and analyze our data quicker. It allows the people, which in our instance, a lot of the people that were entering the data was our production and warehouse staff. It allows them to actually focus on the job that we want them to focus on.
That makes sense. So you mentioned the telephone game and how one person does something, then another, and you lose visibility. With TrinDocs, every document has its own unique ID. Every user has their own license, and our audit trails are very clear. Can you talk about your use of TrinDocs audit trails?
I use audit trails pretty constantly. I use them to see how often my team is going in and looking at a document. It's a positive thing, so we can see and source, like, all right, who was the last person that was in this document? Why hasn't it moved? Can we like prompt them to go back in and maybe solve the issue of why the document's still in the current step? So the audit trails are usually like the first place we go if we want to have a source an issue or see like one, if the workflow is working like we think it's working too.
And you mentioned earlier that your prior organization had a lot of paper, and TrinDocs helped you go paperless. And now I know that, COVID happened during that time of the pandemic. And so I'm just kind of curious how TrinDocs allowed you to survive the pandemic from a work perspective, and how TrinDocs helped you and your team work remotely. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So prior, I used to take home like stacks of checks to review and the invoices and POs. We had a whole packet. So you have a three-way matching packet. You have an invoice, you have a PO, you have a receiving packet, and a check. I used to take on stacks of these, and you'd go into the office and every AP person had stacks of invoices on their desk. That went away slowly. We didn't get rid of all the paper immediately, but probably after about 6 months, a lot of that stuff started going away. And that is also when COVID started hitting. So maybe 6 or 7 months after we like really got the good smooth period, COVID hit, and then people went home. And it was always a policy at my last company to not let people take the actual original invoices home because they would get lost. And really, if they're mailed, then you have no other copies of them. And they weren't put in the system yet because that's why they were taken. They're taking them home to put them in the system. So you really didn't want any of that paperwork to get lost. TrinDocs really solved that problem. We had 4 AP staff, and they were processing, I forget the exact numbers, but by the time I left, which was 2022, it would have taken us twice the amount of staff that we'd have to process the amount of invoices that we're currently processing.
Wow, that's impressive. So that's why you recommended TrinDocs to your new employer. I can see with stats like that.
Yeah, that was one of the selling points because they want to see the tangible savings.
TrinDocs helped you grow and scale growth. Sounds like your invoice count grew without adding headcount. So can scale growth profitably with TrinDocs, it seems.
Yes.
All right. Well, that was with your prior company. Now you're with a new employer implementing TrinDocs with a fresh set of eyes. Can you talk about the onboarding process and how TrinDocs has helped bring your new organization up to speed with a new solution?
TrinDocs is basically made with steps. So you got to kind of switch their mentality to like this step, you're only doing this one thing. And then once you do that thing, you approve it. And then it goes to the next step, and someone else, or maybe you, do a different thing in that step. And it's a key efficiency that TrinDocs has, and it's not always apparent, right? So when we did this at my last company, people wanted to take a document and follow it through the process.
Right.
Because that's the way they're most comfortable with it. You're working on invoice A, so you follow invoice A through every step of the process. And then we realized over time that it was making us a lot slower.
I see.
So working in the buckets that TrinDocs has actually makes you more efficient, right? So in every bucket you go through, you're looking for a certain type of thing. And then once you go, all right, bucket A is just where you make sure all the invoice information is correct. Every day you go through bucket A, first thing, boom, gets approved. Bucket B is where you see if the PO matches the invoice total, right? And this is where TrinDocs will automate, right? So if it matches, TrinDocs will move it on. If it doesn't match, it'll put it to a different bucket. So if you work your buckets, then you become way more efficient than if you just follow each invoice and you work it on a more invoice by invoice transactional method. So that's been the biggest mindset change, basically.
That helps. And so TrinDocs not only takes you paperless and automates manual entry and eliminates those manual processes, but we also improve your processes, it sounds like, and make you more efficient.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That's great. So, Mike, it's been great talking to you. I want to know, if someone was to call you and say, what do you know about TrinDocs? What would your immediate response be? Kind of your 30 to 60 second, here's what TrinDocs does for me. What would you tell them?
What TrinDocs does for me?
Yeah. And your business. What does TrinDocs do for your business?
It's a tool that allows us to be more efficient and to analyze our business.
All right.
You guys will integrate with BC and GP standard. You know what that integration's like. But when you start a project, your project team is going to ask, and they should, they're going to ask you how your business works and how your accounting function works. And you got to really take a good look and think through how your processes work.
Yeah, TrinDocs is a team of accountants and software developers. And so we do approach clients, and sometimes we have to help them understand what their processes are and create them. Other times it's just a matter of documenting them. But we always say, if you can document it, we can do it.
Yes. And that it was very helpful because you come with the prompts, I guess, basically to get people thinking in the right direction of how it's going to work. I know initially when I signed up, I was waiting for your team to just magically know how it worked, but you'll save yourself a lot of grief and time if you just kind of sit down and workflow it out, like how you'd like it to work, where it's currently at and where you want to be.
Okay, that's helpful. And what would you say the ROI for TrinDocs is?
I think it's got a wide range. At the base level, you just use it to automate your AP. The ROI is how efficient that process is, right? So no one's now like doing data entry for every single line item in there. That can save you X amount of dollars and multiplied by however many your invoices grow, right? So there's your ROI for that. Adding other workflows, if adding other efficiencies into it, then your ROI grows.
So when you mention adding other workflows, that makes me think of support. What's your experience with TrinDocs support?
Oh, excellent. Yeah, they usually respond in a few hours, get right back to you. They sit down and they go through your workflow. I have no problems with TrinDocs support at all.
All right. So now with this, I'm just kind of curious, free form, what you want to tell people about TrinDocs.
I see it as a tool, and I think that's helped me a lot. If you go to your website, you have all of these other forms and types of things that TrinDocs can handle. I would take that as a guideline and start thinking about the other processes that I have and trying to build that into one of my TrinDocs workflows, because that's honestly where you get a lot of the value.
Yeah, TrinDocs does AP automation and so much more than AP automation.
So if you just stick with the AP automation, then you'll get a good return, good ROI, but you can really get more, if you start implementing it in other areas. And then if you learn Power BI, or you guys have a Power BI team, I think,
right,
helps you with the reporting. Now you're getting even more, right? So you're not exporting reports to Excel and then manually manipulating data, right? You can create your own reports that are live. And that's another benefit, right? Is I can call up the TrinDocs team or put in a ticket and have a conversation about what I think can be built. Actually, I just had one yesterday with the TrinDocs team. I say I can explain it, how it works in BC, and I don't see a reason why TrinDocs couldn't help do this. Push information to BC and come back and sync. And pretty much every time they're like, I agree. I think we could be able to do that as well.
So you've processed a lot of documents with TrinDocs. I mean, we've been together for a lot of years. When you were in GP, how many documents a year do you think you processed, or a month? How many invoices?
I think we were at 100,000.
Okay, so 100,000 transactions that TrinDocs did for you. And then now that you're in Business Central,
it's much less, but a different industry.
Right?
Yeah.
And in both of those, I believe we did the PO matching automatically for you.
Yeah. We had different systems at my previous company, right? So the catalog orders were in one system, a store operated in another system, and all of our accounting was done in GP. So TrinDocs was able to pull in an invoice from email, read the PO, and based off of the PO structure, choose the right database to pull the PO information from and pull the receiving information from. So an invoice would come in, it would say, this is an invoice for this store based off of the PO number, pull the PO information in there, and then tell us whether it was received or not. And based off of that decision, it went to a different bucket to be posted.
So that sounds like TrinDocs saved you a ton of time.
Yes. Yes. Previously, all of these things were in file cabinets in the office, and someone had to go manually search through everyone to see all the options.
So what did you do with all the file cabinets and hard copies once you went digital with TrinDocs?
We donated them. That's what we ended up doing. Yeah.
Do you have a sense for how many file cabinets you got rid of, or how many office spaces you gained back?
Yeah, we had a filing room. I think that turned into an office for 2 people. I think there was eight or 9 file cabinets in there that are no longer there. Not like the tall file cabinets, like the long ones that were like that fit the hole. Yeah.
Down the hallway kind of place.
Yeah, those kind of file cabinets.
Well, that's great. And TrinDocs gave 2 people offices that were in cubes before, sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's good. Well, I guess the last thing I would ask you, Michael, TrinDocs has 4 core values, and those values are each one word: integrity, excellence, growth, and happiness. And how would you say TrinDocs does in living up to those 4 core values?
Integrity, yeah, solid. I have no complaints. The team is usually very upfront about the capabilities and what they can do, what they can't do. I really appreciate that. Honesty and candor, to be honest. Excellence, right? That's one of them.
Right.
Yeah. In the same vein of the integrity of being honest about their capabilities. Every time your team says that they can do something, that we usually make it work. So I'd say their excellence is high. Growth, your capabilities continue to grow. It seems like you guys are finding new ways to automate and solve problems that people have, which is greatly appreciated, because you could have just stayed stagnant at this is what we do, but instead you're constantly iterating. And happiness, all of the top 3, all the other 3 that I just mentioned lead to the happiness value.
That's fantastic. Michael, I really appreciate this. This has been phenomenal. Is there anything that you thought, well, man, I wish you would have asked me about this, or anything like that you want to talk about?
No, I think I worked those into the conversation either way.
Yeah, you did a really good job.
The reporting aspect is a big aspect, right? Because now you don't have to export reports out. Like, so much of the accountant's job is taking this information, now putting it in this format, and then putting it in that format.
Right.
Whereas now I just connect directly to the data, and my reports build themselves based off of the data.
So tell me more about those reports. What are you reporting on?
Well, a lot of these reports are basis for journal entries. I have a journal entry that needs the receiving report. So I need a receiving log, but I need a receiving log with dollars that comes from a different workflow. So I can combine those in Power BI to give me that information. I need a count of how much for one of our production reports, how many liners did we make for a certain period. Now I have the means to connect directly to the data, do the periods, do my own calculations. I could tell you the length of the liners in metric and imperial, which I have to do because we're an international company and somebody wants it in meters, somebody wants it in feet. But with Power BI, I can connect to the same data source and give them all of this stuff automatically that I've created one time, and then I don't have to do every month. You want to drive me personally crazy is ask me to do this manual task every month.
That's good, and I'm glad you mentioned being an international company.
How you guys have helped is that we have all of these currencies, but in the end, we usually only care about the dollar. In BC, it can be hard to get to that local currency, to that dollar field, but TrinDocs is pulling it back into TrinDocs so I can get at it with the Power BI reporting data. So instead of going into BC and having to look in the general ledger or looking in multiple spots to get the dollar information, I can get it all in one invoice copy in TrinDocs.
But my very last question, you've given me in TrinDocs an hour of your time here that you didn't have to. Why did you do that?
Well, I've used you twice, and I don't think I gave you a review or a testimonial or anything like that last time.
But you don't owe us that. I mean, I know you're a nice guy, but why are you spending time talking about TrinDocs?
I felt like I owed you that, to be honest. I know we paid you, and that's really the contract, right?
Well, Mike, thanks again for being with us. It's been a great pleasure speaking with you for a few minutes. I know you've used TrinDocs twice now, once as a GP user in a former organization, And now as a Business Central user, you chose to bring TrinDocs with you again. And we really thank you for doing that. It sounds like for you, TrinDocs has taken a lot of paper away, increased a lot of visibility, and helped you easily scale growth profitably. And that's a huge testimonial. So thank you for sharing that with us. And everyone out there, make sure you go to TrinDocs.com to see why Michael's so happy to be a TrinDocs super user. Thanks.